The Commission's findings are that Israel targets children to weaken demographic vitality and deny the Palestinian people's right to self-determination.
Israeli forces deliberately targeted Palestinian children as a central element of their genocide in Gaza. The UN's top investigative body on Palestine and Israel has concluded. The finding comes in an 88-page report examining the full scope of harm inflicted on children since October 7th. From precision shootings by snipers and drones to torture in detention, reproductive violence, and the destruction of schools and hospitals. The Commission, which previously concluded that Israel bore responsibility for genocide in Gaza, found that children were targeted through precision weapons, including quadcopters and sniper rifles, and through the systematic destruction of the conditions necessary for their survival. The Commission investigated and documented a consistent pattern of Israeli forces deliberately targeting children using precision weapons. 17 medical practitioners who worked across different hospitals in Gaza described treating large numbers of children with single gunshot wounds to the head and upper body, fired by Israeli snipers or quadcopters. The Commission forensically analysed 15 out of 17 cases brought by doctors. In 12 of those cases, the wounds were consistent with a single gunshot. The Commission also received testimony that Israeli prison guards raped boys in detention and subjected them to other forms of sexual violence as a systematic component of the detention regime. The Commission concluded on reasonable grounds that Israeli authorities and security forces have continued to commit genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in Gaza and war crimes in the West Bank. On genocide, the Commission found that Israeli forces' deliberate targeting of children is one of the key elements establishing genocidal intent. The Commission found that Israeli forces killed children, caused them serious bodily and mental harm, and deliberately imposed conditions of life calculated to destroy them as part of the broader Palestinian group in Gaza. The Commission named specific Israeli military units responsible for killings in individual cases and called for accountability for those with command responsibility. China's LineShine system won the #1 spot in the latest top 500 supercomputer rankings. The Chinese supercomputer was able to calculate 22% faster than the #2 contender, El Capitan, at California's Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. This now becomes the latest sector where the US has been overtaken by China. Tennis court-sized supercomputers are used for frontier scientific research and problems such as predicting hurricanes and determining where oil deposits lie. They also have military applications. The US government uses El Capitan to help maintain its nuclear weapons stockpile, among other tasks. The LineShine, built by the National Supercomputing Center in Shenzhen, relies on domestically developed central processing units instead of graphics processing units or GPUs, which power most of the leading supercomputers. Washington curtailed Chinese supercomputer developers' access to Intel chips and other American hardware in 2015. The Biden administration later blocked the country from accessing powerful GPUs, mostly developed by American chip giant Nvidia, and the tools required to produce them. Despite US tariffs and trade barriers and embargoes that were all designed to stifle China's tech development, China has forged ahead and developed its own indigenous industrial base. The authorities in Crimea, the Ukrainian peninsula controlled by Russia, declared a state of emergency this week after intense air attacks by Ukraine, including a wave of drone strikes overnight that is now one of the largest since the war began. Advances in Ukrainian drone and missile production have enabled Kyiv to launch bigger attacks farther away from the front that can more easily overwhelm Russia's air defences. Over the past several months, Ukraine has carried out increasingly heavy air attacks on Crimea and parts of Russia, puncturing the peace that Russian civilians had largely enjoyed during the 4-year-old war. The attack came after Ukraine carried out its largest drone strike on the Moscow region since the war began, which forced the suspension of flights at the capital's 4 international airports. Gas stations in Crimea have run out of fuel, with local officials banning sales. Rolling power outages have crippled the territory, disrupting water supplies that rely on electric pumps. Even as its drone arsenal has become much more effective, Ukraine is still vastly outmatched by Russia in ballistic missiles, the biggest source of military pressure on Ukraine. Such missiles, which have underpinned Moscow's most devastating air attacks, carry much larger explosive payloads than drones, and their speed makes them hard to intercept. It remains to be seen if this success can alter the battlefield reality in its fourth year of war.